Memorial Day weekend upon us, 38 million Americans traveling for this holiday weekend. Are you going anywhere, Deborah?
To the backyard. And that's about, and
Well, I
that's
hope
about
you
it.
get there safely.
Yes.
I'm going to be heading to Memphis and to Nashville. I told Dan,
Really?
Prof, that I was going to Elvis's house, and he looked at me and said, "Do you mean Graceland?" Yes, I'll be heading to Graceland, but I'll be
Nice.
flying once again. And with what happened with Egypt Air Flight 804, you're always concerned about safety, and now we have to get at the airport 12 hours before our flight leaves
Yes.
with TSA and all that debacle.
Yeah.
But I always think about Egypt Air 804 because no one has come forward yet to claim responsibility if indeed it was a terrorist attack. And with that, we welcome to the show Jack Cashill. He is the author of Flight TWA 800. That book comes out July 5th, but he's also an expert in aviation and in certain disappearances of planes and crashes. And we welcome Jack to the show. Good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing well, and much better than the unfortunate passengers on that airplane.
Yeah. So what is the latest? I mean, Egypt Air is claiming that now the reports from Greek officials that the plane severely turned left 90 degrees, then right 180 degrees, and then fell from 37,000 feet to 10,000 feet is not true. So what can you tell us?
Well, unfortunately, the one thing I've learned in studying airplane crashes, and this is my third book on an airplane crash, actually the second one on TWA 800, is that you cannot expect to get the truth out of the government authorities. Too often, not always, but often, the answer that the government will give you or the authorities in question will give you is the answer that best befits their needs at the time. And that's true not just in places like Egypt, where it's, where a terrorist action in Egypt could be devastating to their, tourist economy, but even to, countries, unfortunately, like the United States.
Hey, Jack, can you refresh our listeners' memory about TWA Flight 800?
Yeah, and part of the reason that you'll hear about this crash coming up is because we're facing the 20th anniversary in July.
Wow.
It's been 20 years.
On July 17th, 1996, this is a TWA 747 with 230 people on board, 12 minutes outside of JFK, heading towards Paris. It blows up off the coast of Long Island in full view, literally, of thousands of people. On the south shore of Long Island is what sort of Hamptons are. I mean, it was sunset on a lovely summer evening, so everyone was out, and more than 750 people told the FBI what they saw. And those who saw it best, and there are at least 250 of these, saw an object rise up off the surface with a red tip and a long contrail, zigzag, arc over, hit the airplane on the right wing, and then watched it deconstruct in the air.
That's not what the government is telling us what happened, correct?
Well, I've read all the eyewitness statements. They're there. They do exist. It's just that what they did, and this is where it gets unfortunate, and not just for the sake of aviation safety, but for the sake of the war on terror, is that we were not allowed to know that happened. So of the 258 official eyewitnesses who saw what appeared to be a missile strike the airplane, the New York Times interviewed not a single one of them. They were not allowed to. And at that time, 96, the Internet was still in its embryonic stage, and people weren't able to communicate with each other particularly well or share that information beyond, an email or something. CompuServe or wherever else was, in vogue at the time. So that story died, and it's an incredible story. And what I've discovered and why I decided to write a second book on this subject is that I've unearthed, actually with other people's help, a huge cache of CIA documents about this crash.
Before
and
you,
what we,
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just throw this in here because I remember that as well. And when it was Pierre Salinger. I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And when he came out and he said he had proof that there was some sort of rocket launch from the ground up, I didn't think that this guy would just make stuff up or not know what he was doing. He had served, I think, 2 presidents. And
Yeah.
but
they
then they
ruined
thought
his reputation.
right. There's like some conspiracy theory. So what really who's responsible for the alleged rocket going up and hitting TWA Flight 800?
And when I first started investigating this, I had expected, first of all, I got into this relatively late, and I'm the opposite of a conspiracy theorist. I always thought of myself as that Socratic nitpicker who rained on the paranoid parades of others, But when I got into this, I realized that I was fully unaware of all the witness statements. And by the time I got into it, and this was in the year 2000, 4 years afterwards, they were all available if you looked hard enough. Every single one of the people the FBI talked to, you could read their witness statements. And then you could start finding the witnesses and talking to them and seeing what they could see. Salinger came out early, and this was, some months after the crash. In fact, he waited, and this is critical, good Democrat that he was. He waited until after the election of 1996, and that's a key date, to go public with what he knew. Now, unfortunately, his knowledge base was a little shakier than it should have been, but he was actually onto something. And what he said, and this was very hard for people to accept at the time, and it was hard for me to accept. I remember watching this from afar, thinking that Salinger was a kook. He said that the U.S. Navy had accidentally shot down the plane. And unfortunately, he was right.
Well, and so, but this hasn't been made public, and no heads have rolled because of this. Who made the mistake? What happened? Who called the shots?
I cannot go that far because I don't know which ship did it or who pulled the trigger. What I do know, and thanks to the CIA documents, is how they brought the CIA in on day one. And their job was, they had one job, and that was to make sure the witnesses were silenced and to ridicule or find some way to explain away what all these hundreds of people saw, actually thousands, because not everyone talked to the FBI, but the ones who did were, they had to get rid of that information.
So in the record books, what with the FAA, how did they say TWA Flight 800 went down?
Well, what they finally concluded was that the fuel tank exploded somehow mysteriously, and they're not sure how. They still don't know how. And so they went through this 4-year-long charade trying to find some explanation for why a commercial airline in the Jet A fuel age would suddenly self-combust in midair, something that never happened before and something that hasn't happened again. And the 747 continued to fly unmodified. I mean, so, there was no one was grounded. The Air Force wanted the 747. They didn't ground that. So there is not a pilot I've ever spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of them, and I speak to TWA veteran groups all the time. There's not a TWA employee I know or a Boeing employee I know who believes what the government said, who thought that was even possible.
So, Jack, you have gained access to these files, so clearly they are not sealed. I guess classified, maybe. I don't know. But why hasn't any other media outlets said, "Hey, let's talk about this. Let's run this story.
Let's hold somebody accountable."
Yeah.
Well, the CIA documents just surfaced months ago. I was actually in the middle of the book when I found them. I was stunned that the CIA let these documents out. I think what happened is they were probably just got indifferent, or no one cared, or no one was paying attention. The FBI also released a video, or let a video. These are all through Freedom of Information Act requests. Let a video out that was stunning. Also, it was an amateur video taken 5 days before the crash in July of a missile test off the coast of Long Island. And the FBI promised us there hadn't been one for 2 years in that area, but there it was 5 days before, and they admitted as much. And now we had the video. The real trick, and if you understand the way the media work, is that they do not want to know this. The major media, and I've been talking to them, I'm happy to share it with them. And I say to them, listen, you make a few phone calls. You can get the head of the FBI to return your phone calls. The New York Times can. I can't. So you make a phone call. You win a Pulitzer Prize. I'm happy to give you the credit for it,
Right.
They do not want to know. And I show them. I'll show you everything I have.
Well, if you want to know the facts,
the
thanks so much, Jack Cashill, for joining us. If you want to know the facts about it, read his new book. It comes out July 5th. TWA 800, the crash, the cover-up, and the conspiracy. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and hope to come back sometime.
All right, Jack.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect